All right, everyone. So, I had an opportunity to meet Brose a couple days ago down at the Garden Fellowship in La Quinta. And we just started visiting. He started sharing with me about what he does. And I said, you want to come to CBI and share with the students? So, all of these, well, how many are graduating? Okay. So part of the students are graduating, how many's going to be here next year in the class? So part came in January, and they're going to be here. So they've been in a 10-month intense going through the entire Bible with the purpose of going into the ministry. Awesome. So, and unfortunately I have to run, so I'm going to turn things over to you now, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's welcome him.
Woo! Appreciate it. So, like you said, my name is Brose. That's not short for anything. That's actually my name, Brose. It's the full thing. And I manage the Shepherd's Life Ministries. We are a nonprofit that plants churches and starts outreaches and aid operations to the poor in Israel. So far we've planted 2 churches, one in Tel Aviv and one up in Haifa. We're working on a 3rd church plant, praying about it, maybe in the Tiberias, Galilee area. We also have an online ministry for people who are unable to attend a physical church or just interested about learning about the Bible from a Jewish perspective. I've been with this ministry since 2012, just came as a volunteer to try and help out for a little bit, and as of January of this year, I actually became president and CEO of the ministry.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, so like Gerald said, I just met him a couple days ago. I'm helping out in the garden with their media team, and yeah, he asked me, he's like, come to talk to students about what you've been doing and how things got started and you're involved with this ministry in Israel. And I was like, sure, I have like a week or 2 to prepare. He's like, how about Friday? I'm like, okay. So I hope this all makes sense. But I thought I'd give you guys a bit of background about how I got involved with this and how all this got started. So, going way back, I was born in Michigan to believing parents who actually got saved at Calvary Chapel Viejo out here, but for some reason felt like they didn't move back to Michigan before I was born, so I had to grow up out there. And it was all good. They raised me in Calvary Chapels out there. My parents raised me in the Word. But when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I really started questioning, like, why we believe what we believe. Like, okay, what makes Christianity different from any other religion? Like, this seems like it's just a close your eyes and believe it sort of thing. And a lot of the answers that I got when I would ask people, they get kind of stressed out, and they're like, no, you just gotta take it on faith. It's just, let the Lord speak to your heart and just confirm this to you. And I'm like, well, I mean, if God is real, why isn't there like evidence and like science and history and things to back it up? Why isn't it based in rational thought? My parents, really to their credit, they didn't freak out or anything when they're 11, 12 year old. By the way, I was homeschooled. If that sheds any light as to why an 11 or 12 year old was so concerned with theology, it's because I was distracted with other stuff. But anyway, they just basically told me they didn't freak out. They were like, oh, our son's losing his faith. They're like, okay, so do your research. Like, look into it, try to find out why, how, what's the meat behind all of this. And so I did. I started looking into atheism and just different religions, things like that, and seeing what the basis is. And thankfully, due to good research and some good apologetics, some good teachers and ministries like Charlie Campbell's Always Be Ready, I was really able to come to the conclusion that what we call Christianity, the teachings of the Bible, aren't just a close your eyes and believe it sort of thing, but it is based in reality, in rational thought, with scientific and historical facts to back it up, that it is a true thing, not just a religion, not just a thing I subscribe to, but it's fact, whether I want to believe it or not. So, with that in mind, around 11, 12 years old, I'm like, okay, so if this is true, and the most important thing I can do is serve the Lord with my life, what does the Lord want me to do? Really thinking about it and praying about it, and also I like movies. I really like movies, and so I was immediately drawn to missions because everything cool happens in other countries. I was like, oh yeah, it's got to be in the 3rd world. That's where I'm going. All right, so I naturally started thinking of like Africa or Asia or South America, maybe the Middle East, but I was really praying about it and trying to come up with something. And one day my parents come to me and they say, hey, the church is having a movie night, and you're gonna come, you're gonna watch it. And I'm like, no, I don't wanna watch some cheesy Christian movie with miserable dialogue, no script. Passed, but my sister, my older sister, who's really awesome, I'll talk more about her, she basically told me, she's like, hey man, I'll go with you, we'll sit in the back and we'll just make fun of the whole thing. I'm like, all right, deal. So I went, and to my surprise, it was not a movie, a silly Christian movie or what have you, but it was actually a movie about the modern history of Israel and their conflict with the surrounding Arab nations since 1948. And as I'm watching this and seeing everything that's going on, I'm like, wow, this looks really important. This looks like something, I'm probably about 13, 14 at this point. Like this looks like something I should be involved in. Am I supposed to go to Israel? Israel is hugely important in the Bible, hugely important in end times. I'm like, I think I'm supposed to go to Israel. And just thinking this, I looked over at my sister who was across the aisle from me, and she just turned and gave me a nod. It was like, yep. And she just really gave confirmation after that, being like, this is what you're meant to do. This is where you're supposed to go. And so, it was awesome. She didn't have like any pride about it. She's 7 years older than me, and she wasn't like, oh, I gotta keep my little brother down. She's like, no, this is something the Lord's chosen before. You need to do this. And thankfully, the Lord also brought some great godly men in my life who came in, the worship leader at our church, and some of my dad's friends, and these guys were strong believers, to really just pour into me and share with me and confirm these things, to encourage them and say, yeah, we really do believe the Lord has called you for this, that this is what you're supposed to do. Again, just putting aside pride, there's a lot of temptation, especially in Michigan where I grew up, to just kind of be like, hey, stay down, kid, you're going to do the same thing like I did, like everybody else did, you're just going to follow the cycle here. So for them to put that aside and be like, no, we think this is actually what you're meant to do, was huge. My parents, on the other hand, they were not so thrilled with the idea. Okay, they were strong believers, and they loved missions, they had friends who were missionaries, they'd never done anything themselves, but just the idea of their crazy 13, 14-year-old son, just as soon as he turns 18, going to the Middle East, didn't sit so well with them, understandably. I mean, just seemed crazy to them. So they told me, no, you're not going to be doing anything like that. You're just going to stick around here. And I was like, no, for sure, I'm going. And they're like, oh, you're 14, you'll get over it. 15, 16 goes by, still focused, still set on this. And I'm trying to get myself prepared for going to Israel. And so using some time and using some money, what do you guys think I did? Do you think I learned Hebrew, the language of the people that I'm going to go minister to? No. Did I learn Jewish culture or the history of Judaism? Anything like that? That would be really, really helpful if I was in the Jewish nation? No, I didn't learn that. I took that time and money and I studied Israeli martial arts. Yeah. Because, never mind trying to minister to people in their own language if you could beat them up with their own martial art. That's the way to go. That makes sense. That's the way to do it. So no, I did that for several years, became an instructor, and just stuck to it. And so 17, 18 is going by, and I'm still focused on doing this, and the Lord just ministered to my heart about it, that, how He wanted me to go with that. He didn't want me to go to Jerusalem, because most people, when you think of Israel, you think of Jerusalem. They think of things like these sandstones and stuff like this, or the Dome of the Rock, the Alaska Mosque, things like this that you see here, the Western Wall. This is what people think of when they think of Jerusalem, or the ramparts here. All these sandstones, things like this, are when they think of Israel in general. But this is actually just a very, very small part of Israel. This is just a small part called the Old City, right, in Jerusalem. The majority is not like this at all. But the Lord specifically laid on my heart Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the metropolitan center. It's the business center of Israel. It's on the Mediterranean coast. It's where the main airport is and the seaports. It's where all their technology is developed. It's a very first world place with lots of pockets of kind of third world poverty in there, because you've got so many different nations and so many different cultures all coming to Israel through Tel Aviv. And Israel shows amnesty to surrounding nations and things, so you've got people from war-torn countries seeking amnesty and asylum in Israel, and they end up in Tel Aviv. So you've got this huge mix of culture. You've got new technology, medical equipment and everything being developed here. Things like the USB port, a lot of the stuff we're using here developed in Tel Aviv, things like this, and that's where I felt the Lord was leading me to go. And specifically that I was supposed to take care of a small church in Tel Aviv, is what he laid on my heart. And so I prayed about it, and once I was 18, I'm like, okay, fine, it's time to go. Gotta do something. And so I found Calvary Chapel Tel Aviv, which I'm like, oh, that works perfect. I know Calvary Chapel. I'm supposed to be in Tel Aviv. They're a small church, awesome. They have a volunteer program. They need people to come and help them out. It was started by Stephen and Patricia Apple back in 2004, who actually came out from Southern California and planted this ministry there, and they were still leading it at that time. And so I sent them an email saying, hey, I'd love to come out for 3 to 6 months, whatever you guys need to help out for a bit. And they're like, oh great, what church is sending you? I'm like, no church, I'm saving my own money. And they're like, oh, okay, so just so you know, Tel Aviv is the 7th most expensive city in the world, and even the most modest accommodations are gonna be upwards of $1,200 a month. I'm like, that's a lot. And so the woman I was emailing with, she's like, so maybe talk to your church, talk to a missions board, talk to something like this. And I'm like, no, I'll call you back when I've got enough. So I got nothing against churches sending people. I love that churches have mission programs sending people out, that's great, but specifically the churches in my area, when I talked to the pastors about it, they didn't have much missions experience, and basically their advice was, hey, if you want to get involved in ministry, we'll send you to seminary, we'll make you a pastor, we'll get you set up this way, and then later you can decide if you want to get involved in the foreign missions. And I just really didn't feel that's what the Lord wanted me to do. That I was just supposed to go as I was, go out and just do what he called me to do on my own. And so 3 years later, when I was 21 years old, I had what I felt was enough money, and I got everything together and asked them, I'm like, hey, is there anything you guys need from me? And it was a time actually very similar to like it is right now, where there were rockets coming in from Gaza and also from Hezbollah, so they were in the middle of this kind of mini war, what they call an intifada. And a lot of my friends were like, you crazy? I'm like, no, this is perfect. Perfect time to go. And so I asked them, do you guys need anything? And they're like, yeah, well, we got this building up in the north that is going to be like a homeless shelter. We need stuff to stock that place, and we're going to need you to work on that. Also, we've got a medical clinic here. We need supplies for that. And we got a soup kitchen we do every week, so any stuff you can bring like that. I'm like, awesome, got it. So I filled up these 2 big duffel bags with medical supplies and just all sorts of stuff that I thought they would need. And sure enough, after about 8 years of it being on my heart and being focused and praying and preparing, I arrived in Tel Aviv, Israel on November 24th, 2012. And when I arrived there, Pat and Stephen Apple, the pastor and his wife, they weren't in the country at that time, but there were some American volunteers who met me. And they were great, but they'd just been there a long time, basically. They told me when I showed up, they're like, hey man, just so you know, we don't really need anything. I'm like, what do you mean? What about the building up in the north? Oh no, full of mold, we had to close it. Oh, okay. What about the medical clinics? I got all these medical supplies. They were like, oh no, we stopped that. Doctor left, went back to Greece. Okay. What about like the soup kitchen? Those these things like, oh, we're kind of putting that on hold with the bombs and everything. So, thanks for coming. Appreciate you bringing all these supplies. And I'm like, what? This is a lot of stuff. And they're like, wow, it's great. You know, if one of the members of our congregation gets a cut, we'll use these Band-Aids, or if someone gets a headache. It was like thousands of dollars worth of medical stuff. And they're like, thanks, we'll store it somewhere. You're welcome to come to the services as long as you're here. I was just crushed. I'm like, what? What happened? Like, I've been listening to the Lord about this for so many years, and now they don't even need me, and they didn't particularly want me there. They're like, oh, thanks, man, appreciate you. So I went back to my hostel, and I was praying about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, what happened? Did I misunderstand something somewhere? Because what? I have no reason to be here. They don't want me here. And so I kept praying about it, and I had enough money left to either buy myself a plane ticket home or to pay the rest of my stay for 3 months at that hostel. And I'm like, Lord, okay, you've confirmed this through so many people, and you've set me on this course so long ago. I'm going to take it on faith that you have me here for a reason. No matter what these people say, no matter what they think they need right now, I'm going to stay. I'm going to take it on faith that you have a reason for me being here. So I paid the rest of my time there in Israel and for the hostel. And I just started attending services and helping out any way I could. I was so kind of broken at that point. I didn't care what I did, just I wanted to be helpful. If I was, sweeping or just bringing drinks for Bible study or whatever the thing was, it was great. I was glad to do it. About 2 weeks later, Pastor Stephen and his wife get back. They were in Cyprus. And I hadn't met Pastor Stephen yet. But I'd seen him teach, and he was on a Saturday. By the way, they have services on Saturday in Israel, not on Sunday, because Sunday's a work day in Israel. In Israel, it's Friday and Saturday are your weekend, because Saturday's the Shabbat, the Sabbath, and that's their day off, and that's the day that we hold services. So I'd seen him teach a Saturday morning service, but I hadn't really talked to him at all. And so one day he calls me and goes, "Hey, Brose, it's Stephen. Do you have a minute? Are you free this afternoon?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course. Could you meet me at the ministry apartment?" "Yeah, definitely." I'm thinking, okay, finally. I can sit down with this guy, I can kind of tell him about this journey and how everything came to this point and just where I'm at right now. And so I'm thinking we're gonna have coffee or something like that. I'm waiting for him at the ministry apartment in the living room. And this guy walks in. Pastor Stephen, bear in mind, he's maybe 64, 65 at this point, things like this, and maybe like 5'5", just a little dude, right? He comes in full kung fu garb. He's got this black gi on and belt, like these combat shoes and everything like that. And I'm just looking, I'm like, what is this? He goes, "So Brose," he takes off his glasses, he goes, "I heard you were a Krav Maga instructor." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm a black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu." I'm like, okay. So I started moving furniture out of the way. And we had us a little fight. Just a little sparring match to see what's up. That's how it went. For about 15 minutes, not trying to hurt each other or anything like that, but just, all right, how's it go? At the end of it, he looks at me and goes, "Hey, well, I'm convinced." I'm like, "Convinced about what?" He goes, "Listen, man, something's happened that's never happened in 10 years of us ministering here. All of our visas are expiring at the same time. We've all got to leave the country, and there's not going to be anybody here to run the church. So I want you to pray about managing the church while we're gone for a month. There's not going to be anybody here to help you. This is going to be you. I'll be on the phone with you, trying to walk you through it all." And of course, my heart is like in my throat. I had never served in a church before. I'd attended church plenty, but I'd never managed anything, much less in another country. And all this guy knows about me, he's known me. I've been in Israel less than 2 weeks at this point, and all he knows about me is my name and that I can fight. That's it. And he's just like, "No, I feel like to reach the level of skill and proficiency that you have in this, you must be a disciplined, dedicated person." Those are his words. He's like, "So I think this is what the Lord wants us to do." I was like, "Okay, yeah, I do. Like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here at this time, even though it seemed like there was no reason for me to be here. That's what he had." And so I accepted, and he started getting me prepared for next week before everybody had to leave to just manage the whole ministry and try to keep everything in line. And while he did that, he took me on a walk through the streets of Tel Aviv here. And he's like, "Hey, one other thing I want you to pray about." And he's showing me, as we're going up and down Alameda, he starts showing me all these homeless people on the streets here. Huge homeless problem in Tel Aviv. They've got lots of refugees. Like I said, they show amnesty. They have asylum for all these people coming in. So people come in, and then they realize it's better to be homeless in Israel than it is to go back to their own war-torn countries. For a lot of them, that's the case, and for others, Israel's very crowded. It's a very small country, and they've got over 8 million people there. They're just crammed into a place that's smaller than San Bernardino, and so there's not a lot of homes. It's hard to live out there. And he starts showing me all these homeless people that are passing. He's like, "Hey, Brose, we've got the weekly soup kitchen and everything, but I want you to pray about starting some kind of mobile outreach to the homeless here. If there's something you can do, like where they are, where they're at on the street, come to them and try and figure out what they need and what we can do for them." And he told me to view the ministry through the lens of Matthew 25, verses 37 through 40, which says, "Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. So that's what he really wanted me to think about this with caring for these homeless, to think about like you're doing it for Jesus directly. Like think of them in that sort of sense, that Lord's counting it that way. For all these things, whether food or drink or clothing or for illness, whatever it is, to minister to them the best you can on the streets there. So again, I'm like, all right, on top of trying to manage this church for a month, I'll also try to start this ministry here. Because again, I had no idea. I was completely unqualified for any ethic. I'd never talked to homeless people before. In my own country, in my own language. Right? I didn't spend much time with them. So trying to start something with homeless people out here who speak broken English at best, and I'm still learning Hebrew at this point. Right? So, yeah, but I trusted that, again, if the Lord had me here, it's for a reason, and he was going to bring it all about, he was going to make it all work. So, 3 weeks afterward, after service, he called myself, that's me on the left in the gray shirt, Odell in the red shirt, and Pastor Stephen is the guy in the middle there with the black jacket and the white shirt, John, the guy in the green shirt there, and Mike, the guy on the right with the black jacket. He called us all up and he basically told the church, hey, these are our elders now. These are the guys that are going to manage this church while I'm gone, while Brian, the associate pastor, is gone. And just, they're in charge. Take use of them. Again, he's known me 3 weeks at this point. And so, but he had really prayed about it and just felt, Lord was telling him, hey, I have this kid here for this reason. So, anyway, and also these ladies here, Mayan and Marlene, they were involved in the women's ministry, the children's ministry at that time. So, they left. I was there alone and just praying and seeking the Lord as much as possible. Pastor Stephen would send videos of his teachings that I would show on a projector every Shabbat, every Saturday for services. And I would mess around with the soundboard and blow people's ears out because I had never messed with the soundboard before. And trying to set up everything. It was just, again, learning everything on the job. Trying to figure out the finances to make sure everything stays paid for and managed at the church there because I got to pay rent, I got to pay the bills, and things like this. But again, I just knew the key to it was just drawing near to the Lord. Just sitting at his feet and listening to what he had to say because I, again, had no idea what I was doing. And so I continued as we were going with this, and I started the ministry outreach to the poor, which was incredibly awkward. In case you guys haven't realized, I'm pretty socially awkward as it is. Again, homeschooled. So much less talking to homeless people that I don't know on the street trying to make something happen there was really difficult. Just walking up to these guys and they're panhandling. They're like, hey, are you gonna give me money or what? And I'm trying to just start a conversation, ask them about what they need. They're like, I need money. Like, are you gonna give me some shekels or what? And sometimes I give them like 2 shekels, which is like 50 cents. By the way, the money in Israel is shekels, new Israeli shekels. And I think they're about 30 cents right now. 1 shekel is like 30 cents. But, and I just tried to talk to them a bit, and it was super awkward. And there were maybe 5 or 6 different guys that I would talk to. And eventually they just got used to me coming around, I guess. They're just like, oh, this guy again, he's gonna come and ask me if I want some socks or I want some food. And so they started opening up to me a little bit. And we communicate roughly as we could, and I try to share the gospel and explain to them, like, hey, there's a reason I'm out here, you know, do you believe in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Messiah? And they're like, oh, Yeshu? Yeah, okay, yeah, you guys believe in that. Yeshu, just so you guys know, in Hebrew, Jesus' name is Yeshua. Right? It's a contraction of Yehoshua, which is originally Joshua. Right? So the religious Orthodox, they say Yeshu or Jeshu, which is not a name in Hebrew. The reason that they do this is it's a form of disrespect, basically, and they teach this to everybody to basically say, indicate to anyone who hears this name that it's a foreign name. So if anyone's talking about Jeshu or Yeshu, the Messiah, it's not the Jewish Messiah, it's some European concept. That's what they want people to think. So when I'm explaining it to them, I'm like, no, not Jeshu, Yeshua. That's a Hebrew name. That's what we would say Joshua or Jesus in English. Anyway, they talked to me and I would share with them as much as possible, and they understood just with my consistency as bumbling and awkward as I was, that I was there to try and help them. So they started opening up to me. And I remember one time I was asking this guy, I'm like, hey, is there anything I can do for you, man? And he goes, okay, you know what, let me show you one thing. And he leans down, he pulls up his pant leg, and he shows me, I hope you guys aren't squeamish. This guy, actually, Aaron, the first guy I talked to out there, he shows me that he's got these wounds on his legs. And he says, man, I need help with this. And he's like, these holes are getting bigger in my legs. And I was like, oh goodness, okay, well, I brought a bunch of medical supplies and things like that, so let me go get some of that. So I ran back, grabbed that stuff again, no idea what I'm doing. And my idea of first aid before was duct tape and super glue. That worked. So anyway, got some bandages, got some topical antibiotics, and thankfully, a couple weeks in, a paramedic who actually lived out in Hemet and come to volunteer with us in Israel happened to be there at the same time. He's like, oh, you're trying to do medical work? He goes, yeah, let me teach you first aid and basic wound care, this trauma care and things like that, and CPR. So he trained me up in all this, taught me how to care for these wounds and how to work on them. And so found out these are actually epidemic among the homeless. They got all these wounds because basically they have no circulation in their legs. They sit all day and just usually on concrete, just out there panhandling. So the blood just pools in their legs and their skin gets all thick. And a lot of times what they do is they inject heroin into their calves with these dirty needles, and it just drives bacteria so deep and they can't get fresh blood. So they just develop these huge holes. Now, I decided to be merciful and not show you some of the other pictures I have here, but some of them are missing so much flesh off their legs. The infections are so insane. And the smell is pretty rough too. But basically what I would do is I'd come, I'd find them, and I'd start working on their legs. Here, I'd start bandaging them up, figuring out what to do, and giving them this topical antibiotic. And a lot of times they had wounds from fights and other just difficult things from living outside and not having any hygiene, a lot of fungal infections, things like this. And thankfully that paramedic was there to kind of give me some pointers and help work things out. And so working on him, and Ilya, just trying to, it's really difficult dealing with these guys out there on the street because you got people moving all around you and things, but they gotta kind of stay where they are. They don't really want to move anywhere. And so this woman in particular, this one was rough. So she had actually gotten bandages at a clinic at some point, and she didn't take them off and didn't change them for like 2 months. So her skin started to grow back over them, and they were getting fused in there. So I found her named Jeanette, and I found her first leg, her left leg, and I worked on that and got that healed up, but she wouldn't show me her right leg until one day she was in so much pain she pulled her pant leg and showed me. It was just such a mess. It was awful, covered in flies and everything. And so I told her, I'm like, I gotta get, she's like, can you just put some medicine, some more bandages over the top? I'm like, no, I can't. I can't put bandages over these rotten bandages. It's gonna kill you if I leave it there. And she's like, okay, well, can you get it off somehow? I'm like, yeah, I've got a lot of hydrogen peroxide here on all this open skin. It's gonna be really painful though for me to take this off you. And she's like, okay, go for it. So I did, and yeah, it was really painful and really stressful, and I'm surrounded by people. So it was really awkward. But we got it cleaned up, we got it taken care of, got it bandaged up, and it would have been a huge mess for her otherwise. I don't think I saw her again after that, maybe once or twice more, and she showed me that she was doing better. But anyway, because Pastor Stephen had told me to view this ministry through the lens of Matthew 25, I started referring to it as the M25 ministry, and started developing these little profiles for each person. You can kind of see in one of the smaller pictures there, sort of how bad these wounds can get. That's Yossi, and he's a Russian guy. And so I saved as much information about them as I could in case I needed somebody else to take over for me, because I knew I can't stay there forever. And so I just started saving all this stuff for them that I could, and teaching them how to bandage their own wounds is the main thing. Teach them, hey, here's how you can do this yourself. That's John his leg, and he actually did a good job on that one. The roughest thing with these guys is teach them, okay, even once they know how to bandage their legs, how to dress their wounds, they don't want to use gloves. I'm like, use gloves, wash your hands, don't do this with dirty hands. They do it anyway. Anyway, but they started getting better, and that's Aaron's legs. His legs were a mess before. But as I'd be doing this, I'd be sharing with them about the Lord, and it gave me a great kind of illustration of what sin does to you and how it starts. And they were talking about how, this just started as a tiny little hole in their leg, or whatever, another little mosquito bite, and it just kept itching it, it got bigger and worse, and so it led us up to a lot of illustrations how I could share with them about sin and the problem of sin, and how you can't just ignore it, and you can't just think that doing any of these other things is going to fix it. You need someone to clear it out and come and help you. And again, I could talk to them about the Messiah, about Yeshua, and what he did for us to heal the internal infection on our souls. And so I had several of them over time come to the Lord, especially just them seeing me out there so much with these guys. And these are some pretty dangerous areas that they're in too. But, and just seeing how I get this stuff for them, and they're like, this had to be expensive. I'm like, yeah, but for you, it's worth it. And just that aspect of it really changed their hearts a lot more than just coming and sitting with them on the street and being like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. Here's why you need to believe in Jesus. I know you're Jewish, I'm a Gentile, but you should listen to me because blah, 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 because they have no reason to listen to me. Right? But once they saw that I really did care about them, and that I was coming there to take care of these guys, and things like that, it made a difference for several of them, and several of them gave their lives to the Lord. And a couple of them actually, interesting kind of stories, they would give their lives to the Lord, and like a few weeks later, even though they were healthy, even though we take care of their wounds and things, they get a lot better. Things like, you see, that's a lot better than it was before.
Yeah.
They would die. They would just pass away. And a lot of people are like, wow, that's a bit, and I'm like, I think that was just the Lord saying, gotcha. Okay, you don't need to stay here anymore. Like, you're safe, you're in my son, you're safe, you can come home. A lot of people, especially when it comes to ministering to the homeless or the refugees, because there's a lot of refugees out there too, that we minister to, but people think the goal is to get them off the street. Like, no, you guys gotta get them inside, you gotta get them a house, you gotta do this sort of stuff. And I tried that several times, and every person I got off the street immediately ended up back on the street. It's the same internal issues that led them to the street in the first place would always lead them back. And that's why the main focus became just about saving them where they were at. Just bringing them Jesus where they were, and less about their actual housing. Because several of them stayed homeless, they chose to be homeless, and they would minister as homeless people to other homeless people that they knew. John, that guy who I showed you, did a good job on us dressing there, he was like that. Because he stayed out there homeless for a long time and just shared the gospel with other homeless people. I'd see him, it was awesome. I'd be on like a bus or something, I'd go down the street and I'd see him pointing in his Bible to some other homeless guy on the street. He had no idea anyone was seeing him. He could see what was going on. But the Lord was just working. And so, yeah, it's been a huge blessing to be able to work with these guys this way. And so that went on. It took me probably that full first month getting this ministry established and doing these sort of things before, it really started to roll, before it started to click. And by that time, the associate pastor Brian came back from his trip in Vienna. And so he comes back, and I'm so proud. I'm like, everything's in order. I'm like, the finances, everything paid for, the services are going good, the ministry's going good, everything's here for you to take. I'm like, yes. And he goes, awesome. I want to go to Haifa. I'm going to go up to the north and work on a church plant there. You good just keeping this down? Yeah. Okay. It's tough. Sometimes when you get like a finish line in your head, like it's gonna, okay, this is gonna be where it's at. Like I just gotta make it to this point, and then the Lord says, no, it's actually, you're gonna have to come with me further. It's gonna go longer than you think. That can be tough at that time, but there was a verse, I wish I had the full address, but it's from 1 Samuel 14, where Jonathan is telling his armor bearer that they should go up and face the Philistines on their own. And the armor bearer says to Jonathan, he's like, go, do all that is in your heart. Behold, I am with you according to your heart. And that was kind of my mindset with ministry in general. It's just, all right, Lord, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. I'm not going to say it's too much, or that, okay, I'm drawing the line here, or okay, I was only going to do this for a month or 3 months or what have you. No, this as much as you want to do, as far as you want to take it, I'm with you. So 9 months later, I'm still managing the church there, and things are going good. Things are starting to get picked up, and we're kind of reaching a stride. The soup kitchen that we do outside is going well. The church is growing. And then my visa expires, and they decide not to renew it, and so I have to come back to the States. But Stephen and Patricia Apple, basically they had set up a home base here in California, Southern California, kind of a main office, and they're like, hey, since you got to leave Israel, come and help us out here with just some of the administrative stuff. I'm still volunteering at this point, but I came and started helping them out there just until it was time for me to go back. And while I was here, they actually hired me as an employee of the nonprofit. You know, it'd been nearly a year that I was volunteering with them and managing things, but they're just like, yeah, no, we think this is the right thing to do. So I started helping them there and teaching classes and going back and forth to Israel for 3 to 6 months of a year, and then coming back to the States and going over there doing this M25 ministry. And they also explained to me that, like, hey, because of our age and our health and things like this, we're not going to be able to go back to Israel full time. They still would for a few months at a time, or maybe a month at a time, but he wasn't going to be able to be the full-time pastor there that he was for nearly 10 years. So he started telling me, he's like, okay, the new mission now is we got to raise up locals. Locals have to take care of this. So that became my focus after that. On following terms, I still always continue the M25 ministry, but when I was going back, the main thing was train up locals to take over the church. I don't know if you guys remember Pastor John. He was up there with me in that original photo with the guys there. John was the guy left in the green shirt. He's from Sierra Leone originally, and this guy is so faithful. He would just always be, again, like sweeping and bringing drinks for Bible study, always has a smile on his face. Things like that, just a faithful servant, happy to help out anywhere he could. He'd been with the church like 10 years or so like that, and just become like an unofficial pastor already to the people there. When we were sending videos, if they had questions, they'd go to John, and John would counsel them, he'd answer them, and it just became very clear that John was going to be the one, that John was going to be the guy who was going to take over this church. And so he didn't have an experience with public speaking or teaching sermons and things like that, so I helped him with that. And he never touched a computer before, so I taught him how to use a computer and how to keep a spreadsheet and how to manage the church finances and things. It took several years, but he's doing a fantastic job now. He's up there teaching all the time. And it was tough for him. He has a really thick accent from where he comes in Sierra Leone, so teaching in English or Hebrew was kind of tough for him, but just teaching him to enunciate, to slow down, say things clearly, that even if his message was only, just a few verses or just a couple points, but if he gets it along clearly and concisely that people can understand, it's worth it. It's good. And so he's just awesome. He's probably my best friend out there, and I talk to him several times a week. And with the Haifa church plant that Pastor Brian had gone up and started working on, we started working with the Navigators Discipleship course. Started doing that in Israel and using these guys. And there's this one guy, Yosef, who was up there, who was born in Israel, lived in America several years, and then moved back to Israel. And he started going through this course. And he completed the full course and everything. And the people who discipled him, they told us that, look, we think Yossi's ready to do something. So we asked him to start a Bible study up there in Haifa. And there's Yossi. And he's a great guy. And again, it was pretty intimidating. It was very intense for him to start just a Bible study. He was attending a messianic ministry up there. And he asked me, he's like, are you guys okay if we start a home Bible study on Mondays? And we'll do some discipleship and things like that. And they're like, yeah, we're all for it. That's fantastic. Once he had over about 10, 15 people, his messianic fellowship he was a part of for several years was no longer okay with it. So they started telling him, they're like, hey, no, you've got to stop this. There's too many people. He's like, well, what? We're just doing a little English Bible study. And they all of a sudden just totally changed their tune on him out of nowhere. And started saying, no, you can't go to, they told their congregation, they're like, you can't come to this church if you attend Yossi's Bible study in his house. And really trashed his name. And that happens unfortunately a lot in Israel. The Messianic fellowships are very territorial. They do not want to meet with others. They don't want other fellowships coming too close to them, anything like this, or potentially another one being started, because not all of them, but several of them, this has happened to Pat Stevens, happened to me, it's happened to another friend of mine down in Beersheba. Once you start growing, they're afraid you're going to take their members and their tithes and offerings. And unfortunately to several of them, Messianic fellowships are a big business. There are a lot of people who will send money for a fellowship in Israel, for a Messianic church. From Europe and from the US, people just send tons of money. One particular Messianic pastor, he goes and he fundraises millions of dollars all the time, just goes around and collects for his fellowship there. There's a lot of money involved, and they don't like the idea that you could be taking some of that money. And as much as we try to explain to them, we're like, listen, we in no way are exclusive in any of our ministries or any of our fellowships. If people from your thing want to come to us, they're welcome, but we're not going to tell them that it's either or. They're welcome to go back to you. It's all good. And we'll still encourage them to tithe to you. That's fine. They don't care. They sent this, his fellowship actually sent an email out to the Calvary Chapels in the US saying about how unfit he is to be a pastor. It was complete slander. It was all nonsense that they just came up with. And so when I refuted all of these things, I had to do all this research and interview people and send out emails going, no, it says not it. Basically what it boiled down to is they say Calvary Chapel didn't get our permission before starting a church on our turf. I was like, that's it. Okay. So anyway, never mind. Yossi's ministry continues to go well. He's a fantastic teacher, an evangelist. He's so good at sharing the gospel with other Jewish people. He's leading it out of his apartment, things like that, and it's just a huge blessing to have them. They're so focused on discipleship and getting people raised up right in the Word, not just attending and not connecting, things like this. So they're fantastic guys, John and Yossi. I talk to them each once a week, at least once a week. And again, I tried to counsel Yossi. I counseled him for about 4 years on how to teach, how to manage finances, how to administrate a church, that it's not, both of them, I had to make this very clear, it's not a democracy. You don't lead a church as a pastor by just asking a congregation, how many of you prefer that I do this? How many of you prefer that I do that? I'm like, that's not what a pastor does. I'm like, your job is to seek the Lord. That's what you're there for. You don't just ask the congregation. It's fine to be in communication with your congregation, know how they feel about things, but they don't sit under you and they don't follow you so that you can just be an organizer, but because you're spending time seeking the Lord and praying and leading the church. So they've both gotten very good about that, and the churches are doing well and growing and staying really focused through this time, and I go back and just help them set things up. And then, 2020 happened. I was there in February, actually trying to get things set up legally for them to be their own nonprofits and associations in Israel, so they can be completely autonomous that way. And as I was doing that, pandemic breaks out. All right. Bear in mind, with both these things, with the legal process and with training pastors, I am not a pastor, and I have no legal knowledge whatsoever. Again, I just keep ending up in these situations, and I just go, okay, Lord, I pray you've got this. I'm the only one here doing this, so I'll just study as hard as I can and pray as hard as I can and try to just sit at your feet and listen to what you're trying to say to me. I think a lot about the verse where Jesus says to Martha, he's like, you are worried about many things, but only one thing is necessary. And that's he's referring to Mary sitting at his feet and just listening to what he's saying, just having a closeness with him. So more than your stress, more than your trying, more than anything, I always knew that what mattered was just your relationship with Christ. How tight is that? How close is that? Because he'll fill in the blanks. He'll take care of everything else. Like he said, only one thing is necessary. You don't have to be worried about the rest. So anyway, 2020 hits and it's all quarantine and masks and things like this. And I'm like, that's great, because I already wear gloves and masks doing the N25 ministry. So as soon as pandemic hit, I suited up. Ready to go. I know what I'm doing. Take care of this. And I got out there, made these backpacks with supplies for all the people, because the homeless have nowhere to quarantine. They have nowhere to go in a quarantine situation. They're just wandering the street like zombies. And so I got out there and just finding them all where they were at, getting these backpacks to them, getting them set up, getting them masks and gloves and all the PPE I could. I even got a pass from the cops who saw me out there, and they're like, what are you doing? It's quarantine. I'm like, I'm getting masks on all these homeless guys and getting gloves on them. All right, man, just stay off the main streets. Okay, cool. So, yep, made these packets that had hand sanitizers and shirt, John in the white shirt. That's the tall guy on the left, that's Derek. He's from Holland originally, but he married an Israeli, so it was in Israel now. He manages the weekly soup kitchen. Mike, the guy in the middle there, he's the worship leader, and Jessica, the woman on the right, she's the women's ministry and children's ministry leader. And these are my folks. Unfortunately, in the end of May of 2020, my visa was expiring. They were not going to renew it in this pandemic. They wanted everybody out. So I've been stateside since then, and just managing everything as well as I can from here. And over the time, over the years, Pastor Stephen has just given me more and more responsibilities, just delegating more and more things to me. And so, like I said, January 1st of this year, actually slightly before that, we had a board meeting. They brought me in and they've been praying about it, and the board voted to allow Pastor Stephen to retire and that I would become president and CEO of the nonprofit. So, and it just really feels like back when it was in 2012, where I don't know what I'm doing. I have no experience in this. I have nothing to pull from, but same Lord who got me through that is same today, and will just continuously bring you into new situations where you are in over your head, where you are not qualified, and see like, hey, okay, will you trust me? Will you draw close to me in this, so you're going to try it in your own strength? And it's always challenging. I don't think he put me through it if it wasn't challenging, because I would just kind of be always like, oh, you already know how to do this. Like, he's always going to test you and draw you deeper into deeper levels of faith. And so that's where I am today, and currently, like I said, there's been missiles falling, and we've been just taking care of people and letting people know if they need to get to bomb shelters or something like that, and they don't have them near them, just to move to a hotel, we'll pay for everything, and get you to bomb shelters or wherever you need to be safe. And we're also working right now in the process, working with Tyndale, the Navigators, to get their whole discipleship course translated into Hebrew, so we can start making a difference that way. And thankfully, we also have that online ministry. And any of the stuff you guys can look up, shepherdslight.com, that's our website. We've got an online church that was hugely helpful during 2020 because everything was shut down. You couldn't meet in person. So for all these people, they could just log on to this site, and we've got worship, we've got chat, and then Pastor Stephen gives a teaching, things like this. So that was just absolutely essential in those times. So now things are starting to open back up, the churches are starting to meet, and we've got things to do now. And my hope, my prayer is to go back in July and try and sort things out as best as possible, and hopefully be able to set things up. I need people to be able to manage the M25 ministry when I'm not there. And that's what we're praying about, and that's the way things are today. And I'm helping. I'm on staff at the Garden Fellowship, which is pastored by Pastor Jason Duff, who is Pastor Stephen Apple's son-in-law. So he hired me part-time to help out on the media department. And just since I was stateside anyway, yeah, of course, I'm stuck here. So anyway, been helping out and planning to go back soon. And with that, I guess I'll open it up. You guys have any questions, anything you guys want me to talk about in regard to Israel ministry or any of that? Yeah.
So the first month that you thought was going to be that finish line, what part of your presentation was that? Was that just the startup into that M25?
Yeah, M25 startup, like all that I was doing, that was all within the first month of all the awkwardness and just dealing with things. That was all the first month until it got kind of rolling there. And then by December there, or almost January, Brian came back, and so that was all within the first month.
So that was your savings.
Yeah.
And then past that, like, how did the Lord provide for you?
They allowed me to stay at the ministry apartment, and Pastor, that's a great question. Pat Stephen Apple would send me a little bit of living money just whenever they could. There wasn't much, but I was allowed to stay at that ministry apartment that they had, and so my housing was covered, so I just really needed money for food. And so they did that for any of the volunteers who were staying long term, that were managing things like that. They make sure you were covered that way. So, yeah.
Is the church there bilingual in English, Hebrew?
It's bilingual. It's mainly in English because we got so many different, especially in Tel Aviv, we've got so many different people from so many different countries coming together, the one language that they all speak is English, but we try to put as much Hebrew in as possible for our Hebrew speakers. Yeah. Yes?
Are you fluent in Hebrew?
I'm not fluent, but I mean, if you can stop me, I can get by on Australia. I know enough of it to understand it and to be able to communicate. But there's several levels of Hebrew. There's just the street Hebrew, like everybody speaks in Tel Aviv. Then there's the poetic Hebrew, that like the songs and the psalms and the poetic writings of the Bible are written in, which follows different rules. And then there's religious Hebrew, which is what like the rest of the Bible is written in, which is very fancy and very complex, which I don't know. But yeah, took me a long time to pick that up too, even dealing with these guys, because so many people in Israel speak English, especially in Tel Aviv, that if you're trying to practice Hebrew with them, they're like, I'll just switch to English, man, come on.
So, you felt the call of God in your life at a young age. Were you always consistent from that point when you heard the call, or was it always like clear, you were always moving in that direction, or was it like an ebb and a flow?
I always knew that's what I was going to do. There were times I was more passionate about it, or that it was clearer to me, and times when it was less clear, especially when it came to like the logistics of how am I going to manage this. Like, oh, well, I knew I had family in Greece and things like this, so maybe I should get more connected with them and get started in Greece and then go to Israel from there, so I could go back and forth. But that didn't pan out. And, some thoughts of, well, how is this going to work? Were more the concerns, but generally, yeah, it was pretty focused and pretty consistent. It's something, again, thankfully, I had those great people, those great men, and my sister, and people like that to just be like, no, you need to focus on this. One man actually said to me too, he's like, dude, he's like, I originally wanted to do something similar to that. He's like, I felt a call in my life when I was a new believer. He's like, and I wish I would have done it, but he's like, I got distracted and I got involved in other things, and eventually I got married, and now I've got a family. He's like, and that's my ministry. He goes, but for you, he's like, you don't do that. He's like, you stay focused on this. And you don't mess around, you don't try to chase other avenues. He's like, finish what the Lord laid on your heart to do. And don't follow one way or the left or the left or the right, but just get this done for us, because there's several of them. They actually, many of them were like, yeah, I wanted to do something similar too, but life just caught up with me and it didn't pan out. So, yeah. This one.
What were some of your biggest obstacles doing ministry in Israel?
The smell of those cuts on the
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been several crazy things that have happened. Biggest obstacles. So, a lot of the challenges you face in ministering in Israel are very like first century church kind of problems. There's people not understanding how the structure works, or things like this, or how a sermon works. So you have people just shouting in the middle of the sermon, asking questions and things like this, like not even listening, or not being considerate of one another. Issues with false doctrine creeping in all the time. That's a constant one. People coming in with like, oh, I got this new doctrine, Lord showed me something new. Guess what, guys? We've been doing it wrong the whole time. The Holy Spirit's a woman. And we're like, what? No. And trying to deal with that. It's always just dealing with people in that sense. People who come in and they're bringing false doctrine, they're causing trouble, or dealing with this sort of thing. They started, before Pastor John took over, I come and they started calling me the hatchet man whenever I'd show up in Israel, because they knew if I was going to show up, I was going to start kicking people out of the church. Because just without there being a pastor or shepherd in the church at that time, people would just come in and start taking roles and being like, hey, I'm leading this now, but there wasn't somebody to kind of kick out the wolves. And so I'd show up and I'd kind of look at the few elders that we had. I'm like, why are these people still here? They're like, well, they're not that bad. And I'm like, no, they are. You need to tell them, you need to admonish them, and if they don't stop teaching this stuff or getting involved in these things, you need to ask them to leave. And that's how it would go a lot of times. It's just actually sticking to it. Now, try to be as loving as possible. But a lot of times, people in the Middle East, on that side of the world, they are not subtle. And they are not reserved about things. They blow up over stuff and will create scenes, things like that. So it's always tricky dealing with them that way. And dealing with things like whenever we would have bombings, things like this, where you hear the sirens going off, rockets are coming down, and trying to get people organized and let them know, okay, here's where the bomb shelters are. If people aren't in bomb shelters, here's what you need to do. And keeping them calm and focused, to just be praying, not to get scared. And that's always been a huge challenge. But actually, you know what, I'll tell you what, the biggest obstacle, number one, all the time, is me. It's my own heart and my own flesh trying to get in and either make me angry about things or make me proud or cause some sort of issue here or there. The constant struggle is always against myself, in a way. So. Yes, sir.
Do you go around and speak at other churches?
No.
Okay. So, coming here, obviously, Gerald kind of asked you to come here, so that's not something that you normally do. So, okay, so then, another question, sorry. Like, what would you, I guess, what would you say to us about your ministry to, like, where do you guys need help, or, I don't know, I guess, like, what do you think Gerald's whole idea of having you come here was? Like, is there a call to action or anything like that?
Well, okay, yeah. Obviously, we need prayer, we need things like that, and I guess with the things going on, we need things to open back up so we can get back involved in ministry that way. I think the main thing, if I can share something with you guys this way, is just if you're considering ministry, if you're considering getting involved in these things like you guys are, is just to just understand that it's a constant work of faith. It's constantly depending on the Lord and just being taken from one situation to the next. And again, each time you're going to be in over your head. It's going to be things that you're not prepared for. And if I can give you guys a couple of tips before you, if you're planning on heading out to the foreign field, just a couple of things that resonate with me. First one is be prepared, not perfect. So what I mean by that is, if you know the Lord has laid something on your heart, something to do this way, then do your best to prepare. Get your finances in order. Get your arrangements set up, your accommodations, or find out exactly what you plan to do there. Because we've had so many volunteers over the years come out, and they're like, "Hey, I'm totally broke. I have nowhere to stay, but I came out here on faith to serve." And you just end up becoming a burden to the church when you do that, because now we got to buy you a plane ticket and send you home, right? So do your best to prepare and be ready to do what the Lord has laid on your heart, but don't wait for things to be perfect, right? Because if you're waiting for everything in your life to be perfect for you to go to ministry, a lot of times it's not going to happen, right? It starts with seeking the Lord, and it's got to continue in seeking the Lord and listening to the Lord and what He does, what He, how He has His time to set up. So as He laid it on your heart to get involved in this ministry, when He says it's time to go, then go. You can't wait for it all to be perfect. Right? You'll just get like this analysis paralysis, and you'll always find something that could be better. So, then the second thing is keep calm and seek the Lord. So in the midst of all that preparing and things like that, expect that it's all going to come out from under you. Prepare the best you can, yes, do that. But what often happens, what happened to Pat and Stephen, what happened to me, what's happened to people since me, is you arrive at wherever you plan to go and everything falls apart. The way you were thinking it was going to go, it does not go that way. The Lord kind of yanks the rug out from under you because He's trying to teach you that lesson to depend on Him through all of this. That it's not about your planning, it's not about how well you've got it covered. You're going to have to depend on Him. You're going to have to draw closer to Him. And so you need to stay calm, and you need to keep seeking Him, and don't just, if things fall apart, don't just tuck tail and turn back home, right? Trust that He has a reason for you being here, and He wants you to trust Him through it, to stay calm and serve in faith. And then third thing, as you guys get involved with stuff here, stay humble at all times. I mean, if you come over there, it's okay to be different, and it's okay to have your own opinions about things, but don't let them become hang-ups. Don't let them become issues. Like if you're King James only, you think that's it. Or if you kind of lean toward Calvinism or something like this. Or if you are post-trib, something, fine opinions to have or what, okay. But don't let those become issues that you bring to the mission field, to the ministry, that you're like, no. Because we've had people do that before, like, no, you have to get all these Bibles out of here, these are all bad translations. Things like that, you just create problems, right? You gotta humble yourself. Don't allow yourself to get into fights or spats with other volunteers or other ministers, things like that. And I know we're all Americans here. We're coming from the first world, but when you come to the third world, don't just immediately think like, oh, I've been here a week, I'll tell you everything that's wrong with your ministry and everything you need to do to get it fixed. That's not your place. Okay? Chances are they know already what needs to be fixed, if it's that way, or you just don't understand because you haven't been there, you don't know what the situation's like. So stay humble, come with a humble, serving heart that way. And lastly, recognize that spiritual warfare is real. That when you're going out there, the enemy does not want you serving the Lord this way, in this place. There's a lot more dangerous places to serve than Israel and the world, even though we have our problems, we have wars and things like that going on. But really one of the hardest things there is the spiritual warfare, because I really believe that if there was one nation in the world that the enemy could keep from coming to the Lord, it would be Israel. So the spiritual warfare there is insane. I've had people who were businessmen and professionals and all these sort of things, military people who are really squared away, show up in Israel and just fall apart, just completely succumb to depression or whatever issues that they have personally, and just collapse this way, because the spiritual warfare is so strong. You need to recognize that that's happening, and don't let yourself fail over a feeling, whether it's fear or anger or disappointment or resent, any of these things. The enemy will bring them to the surface when you try to minister, right? And you have to knuckle down and know, okay, no, I'm not going to give up just because I feel this way, or I'm not going to act crazy. This sort of thing, which we've had several people fall apart. And another aspect of it that doesn't get mentioned a lot, when you come out to the mission field, don't come looking to get married. This might seem kind of obvious, but a lot of people come out and I guess, they're so on fire to serve. They're like, yeah, absolutely, I've been praying about this forever, I've come out, I want to help you guys here. And maybe a week later, they're like, oh, I've fallen in love. I met somebody, I've fallen in love with someone in Israel or someone at the church or someone here, and I think we're going to get married. I'm like, holy cow, you've only been here a week. What are you doing? And they're like, no, I think it's real. And so we would tell them, like, listen, gently, we really think this is something the enemy's going to try and use to throw you off here. And a lot of times it would. I mean, almost every time. A couple weeks later, their heart's broken, they go back home. Yeah. Happens a lot. It's very sad, but no, it's been a blessing to be able to do these things, and if you can try to remember those things when you go out to whatever ministry you're going in, it'll help a lot. If the best you can do is just not create problems, that's appreciated, because a lot of people come out and they just bring their issues. They forget why they're there. A lot of times they come thinking like this is a tour group or something that they paid for and they should be getting a ministry experience back. It's like, no, that's not how this works. And really what we need, I love seeing all you guys here studying and learning the gospel, learning the word. We need people who know that, but we also need people who know how to put on the full armor of God. We need people who understand that your sword and your shield, sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and the shield of faith, aren't just for you to maintain your position, right, but for you to move forward and take ground. We need more men like that. And honest, Lord bless all you ladies who are studying here, but in general, we need more men. I'm one of the few guys out there. I think last statistic I read is women outnumber men on the foreign field 4-1. So for every guy like me who's out there, there's four other ladies who have already answered the call. If we need more men, we need men who know how to be men of God, who can go out and have courage and be strong in their faith and share the gospel, things like this. Because honestly, I love working with all the sisters that we have out there. They're wonderful, godly women, things like that. But where are my brothers at? Like, I need my brothers. I need more men out there. I'm by far the youngest of any guys that are out there. I was 21 when I arrived. I'm 29 now. And so for you guys who are praying about it, getting yourself squared away, it's important to know doctrine, it's important to know theology, but we need you to know how to use faith. We need you to know how to be a servant. We need you to know how to go out and share with people and do these kind of things. If you're getting involved in the foreign field, we need you to know how to use the weapons of this spiritual warfare. And so as you guys are studying here and focusing on that and praying about where the Lord has you guys, wherever He wants you guys to go, to understand it's less about whether you can argue certain points on theology or doctrine really well, but how well can you serve? How well can you show people the love of Christ? How well can you endure hardships and persevere through these difficult things? Because if you got anything from what I've been saying here, I mean, I've even told you guys like the half of the diseases I've got doing the M25 ministry, times I've been attacked. And like I did mention the bombings and things like this, there's going to be a lot of hardships, there's going to be a lot of difficult things that the Lord will bring you through if you know how to do it, if you know how to dig in and draw near. But if you're just kind of in your emotions or you're doing your own thing like this, or all you know is book knowledge, what have you, it's not going to hold you. And so, as you guys are praying about this and preparing for wherever you're going to go, if it's foreign or domestic in this sort of way, it's having that humility, being humble enough. That's really how I define ministry. Being humble enough to let the Lord work through you. And it's not about your own skills, your own strength, but being that close to the Lord. So, anyway, I apologize. I found out today that I have until 3 here. So I asked him, how long am I going to teach for? He goes, so as long as you want. So, anyway, it's only 2:10, but yeah.
Still had to do questions and stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, talking about seeking the Lord and seeking the face of God and seeking Him. What does that look like in your daily routine and living, seeing the face of God?
Sure, great question. So first thing I do in my devotions when I'm truly seeking Him, is I just start praying about everything that's on my heart, just getting it all out. Everything that's making noise in my heart and mind, I just pour it out to Him. Right? Philippians 4:6-7, right? Be anxious for nothing, but in all things through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And then what happens? The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind. So I need to get all that off my chest and out, and all my anxieties, anything that's on my heart, out to Him first. And then I get into His Word and I look for His answers. I look for what He wants to say to me through His Word. Maybe it will be a direct answer to something I was just praying about, or a lot of times it's something else He wants to point out in my life. Start looking for the verses and how they apply, and pray that back to Him. Praying back, let it be like a conversation this way. Lord, what do you want me? What do you want to say to me through this scripture, through this time? Or what are you laying on my heart? And it does take time. If it comes into, you can't let it become just a check mark, I did my devotions in the morning kind of thing. But you really do have to get to that point where all the noise of the world quiets down. It takes time. And we do have a lot of noise. There's a lot of things to distract us and a lot of stuff in our hearts, and it takes time to give that all to the Lord so you can hear that still small voice. And that's been a huge part of my seeking Him. Is a lot of times He answers me through scripture, He answers me through prayer. I'm listening for what He wants to say to me. And then sometimes He gives me answers that I'm like, wow, that's not exactly what I wanted. And so in my flesh, occasionally I've been like, what was that, Lord? I didn't hear that. And it always ends up poorly. But He's always patient, brings me back. And so that's always been the thing, have that conversational kind of time with the Lord, where you're praying about what's on your heart, praying about all these things, and looking for His answers in His Word and in your time of prayer back to Him. let it be that kind of relationship sort of thing. So that's been my seeking the Lord that way. This,
So as you're saying, your observation right there was like 4 women to 1 man. In the mission field, for your observation, what do you think is the problem? Why that is? Like, why the men aren't there? Like, is it spiritual warfare? Is it like, what do you think the issue is? Like, what?
yeah, well, I think a lot of it is spiritual warfare. I think the enemy is just really going on the attack on men to really make them unmotivated in these things. I know a lot of guys that just don't have a passion or an interest in really getting involved in things or stepping out. They're like very comfortable where they're at. They're always looking for comfort in this way of like, I'm good here. I don't really want to be challenged. I really don't want to go out somewhere else. That's also a way I do think it's very spiritual. I think there's aspects of society that encourage men in bad areas and things like this. Even the way that perhaps we form church and things in the U.S. since following World War II, that there's not as much focus on getting men out there on the mission field, things like this, and not as much focus on the good works that we're called to do, like Ephesians 2:10, that we were created to do. But it's just a lot about, well, share your gospel with a coworker, share the gospel with your friends, this thing. But when it comes to actually get out there and try something, I don't know how much encouragement there is that way. And yeah, I think all those things kind of work together with the enemy to just keep men comfortable, and also with their pride to keep them from going out and trying something that may end badly for them. Yeah, I think there's an imbalance there that way.
So how long are you here with us for?
You can end early.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
you don't feel pressured. I was trying.
We usually take a little break, so maybe we could take a break and then see if we get more questions when we come back.
Okay, sounds good. Great. So,
Any questions?
yeah, exactly. Please.
So you shared about focus, the discipline, specifically with not getting distracted with relationships and whatever. Any tips? What would you say?
Yeah.
What would you say to us going into ministry, and how to stay focused and how to combat that? Because in that situation, you'd be your own enemy.
Yeah.
Like you said. So.
Yeah, exactly. Understanding that in this way that the Lord is in control this way, and if this is His desire for you, the impetus is not on you to bring it about. Like if you're out there and you're ministering and you're focused on this, and you see a person that you like and you feel really drawn to, this whole sort of thing, or what you're thinking about getting into a relationship, this whole sort of thing, if that's His will, He'll bring it to pass. It's not for you to get away from what you know He's called you to do, because of something that you think you might want from where you're at. So stay focused on what you're doing, and if He brings it to pass, He'll bring it to pass. And just realize there's a cost if you don't. If you try this, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna try this relationship, something like that. It's gonna affect the thing that He actually has called you to do. I've seen it happen a lot of times, and it throws you off. Again, when you get really emotional like that, in like the relationship sense, you're really not in a place where you're gonna be good for ministry. You're focused on something else now. And so, I also think it's good just to decide beforehand, like, all right, from this time to this time, I'm doing just ministry. This is the thing that I'm focused on in my life. I'm not gonna be open to relationships while I'm doing from this time to this time. Whatever it is, I'm gonna stay with it. And I'm gonna make sure, because Scripture really confirms, right, in 1 Corinthians 3, that we'll be rewarded for the things that we build on the foundation of Christ, that ministry is important. There's these kind of things. And it has a huge effect this way. And recognizing that there is that spiritual warfare, and you don't want to be distracted. So set yourself up beforehand. Stay accountable to people, have good fellowship with these guys that you can get counsel from, and focus on finishing your commitment to ministry well, without, being focused on, oh, do I get married in the middle of this, or is this going to lead to my marriage? Because you look at it from a biblical perspective, like 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the pinnacle of human existence isn't getting married. That's not the number one chief thing that God has for you. It's to know Him, love Him, and serve Him. That's the main focus of your life. And if that's what you're focused on, if that's what you're putting first, then the rest will come. Again, Matthew 6:33, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these will be added to you as well. When your priorities are in order, He'll know when it's the right time. He'll know when you're in the right situation to be in a relationship. So you don't have to worry about it as long as you're focused on Him. I don't know if that really helped, if that answered your question or not. But.
Did you set a time for yourself? Like how do you?
Yeah, originally it was going to be that 3 to 6 months. I was just going to be dead focused on this thing, but just as it's gone further and things like that, I was just like, no, I'm going to keep going and keep focused on this until my situation changes. I also looked at my situation in a practical sense. I was moving and going back and forth, constantly working for a nonprofit that sometimes paid me, sometimes didn't, and things like this. So I just decided, I'm like, no, I'm going to live the way that I can live right now in serving the Lord and not worry about the getting involved in a relationship while I'm constantly traveling and staying in different people's houses and all over the time. So the time actually, and this is not that I'm looking or anything like that at all, but now that I've actually got a place, I'm in a stable situation, things like that. And if you were in the same sort of situation, you could be more open at that point. But for me personally, that was just the thing over the last 8 years, just stay focused, stay on it. And it does take a lot of discipline for sure. Yes?
So has there ever been like a time where you like backslid for like a while and it like took your focus off like the bigger picture where you're supposed to like get done with? Like how would you like get through that?
I've never had a long backslide that way, but I've definitely had seasons where I knew I was in my flesh, where I was serving the Lord in my flesh, where I was not focused or not doing things for the right reasons. And I wish I could say that I had a way of bringing myself back out of it, but really just the Lord humbled me. There would be some kind of crash and burn moment where I would be really embarrassed and these things. I'm like, and Lord would grant me clarity from that time to look back and I'm like, here's where I got off track. Here's where I went. Now, obviously, the scripture says that, to humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. It's better if you can reach that moment on your own and recognize when you're in your flesh and go, okay, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to get the things out of my life that are distracting me from the Lord, and I'm going to just recommit to my time and my service with Him. That's obviously better. Unfortunately, in my experience, most of the time, I had to be humbled in order to come back. To get out of that really fleshly state. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, can I pray for you guys? Okay. So, Father in heaven, Lord, I just lift up this class to you right now, and I thank you so much that they all have a heart to serve you, Lord, that they all want to know you better and want to have an effect for your kingdom, Lord, in this life, that they're not just living with the knowledge of you and letting it sit in their back pocket, Lord, but that they're trying to do something with it. They're seeking what you have for them and your destiny, your plan for them, Lord. I just pray that you would continue to speak to each and every one of them, give them a clear vision, a clear direction, give them the humility to follow that path, Lord, to walk in it faithfully, and to be able to overcome the obstacles and the things that they face as they go through their lives, Lord. Father, bless them with that strength and that focus, that they would accomplish all your will for them, Lord, and they would not fall short or become distracted by anything. And I pray that one day I can see them all again when we're all with you, Lord, and we could share about what you've done and the things you accomplished through each of their lives, Lord. For anyone who's struggling with anything today, Lord, if anyone has questions or has an issue in any of this, Father, I just pray you bless them, minister to them that right now, and just confirm and encourage them that you do have a great and wonderful plan for their lives. And as long as they are sitting at your feet, drawing near to you, Lord, putting their relationship with you first, that you will bring it to pass in their bless them, I pray in Jesus' name.